Hello, Marty.
Good afternoon, John. John Donovan, Marty Keller here, doing our intentional living podcast. It's a beautiful, almost summer day here in Sacramento.
Yeah, same here. This is a beautiful day outside.
Yeah. So I wanted to report to you a little bit about the new gut check meeting.
Oh, okay.
And something that came up this week, a podcast that I watched. I want to see if I can tell you a little bit about it and weave in anything that might be pertinent. So we started, for those of you who are new to our podcast and to our accountability practice, we have different ways that we host meetings to get at those subconscious beliefs, fears, feelings, expectations, habits that can be obstacles to what we want in our lives. And we started a new meeting, which we called the gut check meeting, a few weeks ago, to begin to examine how and if and how that principle might also apply to our physical health. How much, if any, role do my subconscious thoughts and feelings play in my physical bodily health? And we're using a couple of books, but we're starting out with a book by an author, British author named Joe Marchant, called Cure: A Journey into the Science of Mind Over Body. And she wrote this about 5-6 years ago. And so we started out, first of all, by just checking in differently from the way we check in on our regular accountability meetings. We check in on what's our physical feeling and focus on the physical as a way to start and a way to get present with the sensations that our bodies are always producing. We tend to, or I'll just own it, I tend to pay more attention to my body when it's hurting than when it's not. And but the truth is, my body's always producing sensations, whether they're sensations of pain or sensations of well-being.
Yeah.
And so we're working on, in this meeting, developing the habit of focusing as best we can on physical sensation. And we've talked about this on this podcast in the past, about things that we label emotions, which expresses physical sensations. And there may be some power and wisdom in doing our best to stay with the sensation itself without trying to give it a name. So this is just a practice that we are working on in this meeting. And then we're also, as we focus on our physical sensations, our physical health, or our physical dis-ease, we're starting to develop a process of using the power of intention on our physical well-being. So we had the experience of someone who was having a challenge with an infection, and in asking the question, what do you want? It was interesting that it took a couple of moments before the person said, I want to have this particular organ of my body be healthy, and set an intention around that. And so we're learning, and it's a very new kind of inquiry as we keep our focus on physical reality without pretending that the emotional and spiritual aren't present. Not at all, because we're seeking to, ultimately, I'm seeking in this work to integrate, to be conscious of body, mind, spirit operating as a single activity, expressing in this particular person.
Right.
And so with that in mind, we've started reading the book. We're reading sections from the book that illustrate some of the points that she's seeking to make. She does a lot of weaving anecdote in and out of the greater principles that she's looking to enunciate.
Mhm.
And the first chapter is the one we've gotten through, is starts out by looking at research into the placebo effect.
Mhm.
And the placebo effect being a way in which humans will sometimes find curative or pain relieving experiences from medicines that that we are told are going to produce a certain property, but they're actually just sugar pills.
Right.
And there's something about the fact that we believe that these medicines will have a determined effect that somehow works to produce that effect. And it's, even though the medicine has got no particular chemical possibility on its own, there's something in the mind that can produce the very same effect.
Mhm.
And we are going to move into the second chapter, where she actually goes into a lot more detail, a lot more research into what Western scientists are studying in terms of all the variations and implications of the placebo effect.
Mhm.
So for the purposes of accountability, again, I'm looking to understand or to know myself. This is what I learned from you. I do this work to get a deeper and better and frankly more loving awareness of myself. And myself includes this physical body temple, as it's called in Christianity, and then see how we all the elements of me can work together to produce the life that I want to live.
Mhm.
So that's just a little introduction as to how things are going. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun because everybody who's there is excited about a different inquiry, and the material that's being presented by Jo Marchant is provocative, and she's a good and clear writer. So we can take in what she has to say pretty easily. We can ask questions if we don't quite get it. So I thought I'd start there and just give you an update about this new meeting and my particular joy and enjoyment of it. See if you have any reflections.
This mind-body spirit connection, mind-body connection has been talked about for a long time. And could you first, and maybe it's not appropriate, but first, like go through the story about why you decided, what happened to you physically that gave you the idea to start this meeting?
Sure. This actually came out of a dialogue that we were engaged in one of our Rusty Nail meetings a couple of months back, maybe 3 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
One of our members, when checking in, was reporting some unusual or abnormal discomfort that she was experiencing with a chronic illness of her that she'd been living with for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And the nature of her condition was such that it reminded me of my own condition. I have, or I supposedly have, I'm not sure I have it anymore, quite frankly, but that's a separate question.
Mm-hmm.
I have what's called Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune syndrome that is that manifests as the intestinal tract attacking itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it showed up first for me when I was 18, and it showed up as a very serious blockage in my intestine, an inflammation and a blockage. And I had to have a couple of surgeries, including one surgery where they removed several feet of my small and large intestine where the blockage and the inflammation were occurring. And it's something that I've lived with my whole life. and would, for the most part, not bother me. But every 3 or 4 years, I would get an attack where I would get an inflammation and an obstruction in my bowel, and oftentimes the pain would be acute enough that I would have to be hospitalized, or at least go to the emergency room and be given morphine or some other serious painkiller. And usually these episodes would last maybe 12 hours. Eventually the bowel would heal itself. And there was, even when I was hospitalized, there wasn't necessarily a medical intervention. There was just the awareness that if we just stop putting food into the alimentary canal and stop putting pressure on where this inflammation was occurring, that eventually the inflammation would die down of itself, which it always did. Sometimes they'd put me on IV fluids just because I wasn't going to be able to do much intake of anything. And about 6 or 7 years ago, I had a couple of attacks the same summer, which had never ever happened before, and it was really kind of scary. And went so far as to consult with a surgeon, because my GI, my gastrointestinal specialist, was concerned that my physical ailment might be of such dimension that there might need to be surgery again. And good news is we never got there. And she put me on a really interesting medication. I was actually on this medication when these flare-ups occurred, but it's a medication that supposedly suppresses the immune system in my gut so that it won't attack itself. And now it's been 5 or 6 years since I have had one of these acute attacks. And so as I was sharing this with the group, another person then shared some of the experiences that she's been having with a completely different kind of chronic illness. And I remembered the book or the work of John Sarno, MD, out of New York City, who had pioneered the investigation into curing back pain, particularly lower back pain. And I remember reading his theory that back pain, chronic back pain, was essentially the result of repressed rage, and that the pain was where the repressed rage ended up in the body, and causing pain and problems because the rage was still there, and now it was activated in the musculature of the person suffering the back problems. And then so he started pioneering working with psychotherapists for his back patients, and found that oftentimes a number of cures or healings could be affected by having these folks undergo dual therapy, physical and psychological, in conjunction with each other.
Right.
And then I remembered that later on he said that his theory was all chronic diseases were the result of repressed emotional energetics from childhood.
Yep.
What we would now maybe call complex PTSD. I don't know if that term was around when Sarno was alive and working. He passed away a number of years ago. So I remember that sitting in the meeting, I said, I just had this flash of insights, like, why don't we start a meeting and start exploring this? So I raised it to the group, I think the next week, and there was sufficient interest that it took a while to get it underway, but we finally did. And so that was the origin of the inquiry. And there's a lot of personal experience that I've had with this question that I think is the question for me, which is, how does accountability practice support physical health. And one of the things that we read in Joe Marchand's book toward the end is the research that's gone into the relationship of stress to the production of chronic illness. And when you read the chapter, you get this really interesting insight that while the body is designed to deal with stress, I mean, the body's stress is inevitable and unavoidable. The body is designed to deal with stress in a way that it gets processed and completed.
Yeah.
So that if we are manufacturing stress that is not allowed to be completed, is not allowed to just do the stress and then settle back down after whatever was causing the stress was dealt with. If we, as adult children of alcoholics or adult children of dysfunctional families, learn to manufacture and stress ourselves without even being aware that we are doing this to ourselves, then if this is a chronic activity, and I think of in the adult children of alcoholics laundry list, become addicted to excitement. Well, what is excitement? But the production of adrenaline and other stressors on the body. Mm-hmm. Then we may find that our physical health becomes challenged. So so the question to me is, since it's been 6 or 7 years since I had an acute outbreak of Crohn's disease, it's like, well, I wonder how that might be related to the work I've done in this process. Yeah. Because and I hadn't thought about it until I read her book, and you and I started talking about this, and others started talking about it. One of the benefits of doing accountability practice on a regular basis is the reduction of stress. Yeah. It's the maybe elimination is the wrong word, but the reduction of chronic stress production. Yeah. When I own what's going on in my life, we've talked about this many times, John, that sense of relief that the body feels when we own a truth that we've knotted up inside ourselves for years and years and years. And all of a sudden we say, I like being in debt, or right, I'm a bad dad, whatever it is. And the body, we've all had this experience, the body just almost jumps for joy in the truth finally being told. Yep. And then the process is tell the truth, feel the impact of the truth, and then say what we want. And there's something healing about the speaking into the world, what we want, and setting an intention around that. So for me, the question is that process, owning the truth about myself, which is a de-stressor physiologically, and the speaking of what I want in its place, which is also a de-stressor, or it's almost an anti-stressor. I intend to feel joy. I intend to feel peace. I intend to feel carefree, whatever. Those are non-stressing experiences. Perhaps the continued work is creating a much lower stress level in my body just by doing the work, but not even being conscious of it. Now I'm conscious of it, having raised this awareness, that when we do the gut check work, we do work in the meeting, and we're going to focus more explicitly or consciously on our physical well-being, that maybe just working at a meeting with this intentionality can accelerate the reduction of stress.
Exactly. I agree 100%. Wow.
Yeah.
So this mind-body connection has been talked about, well, probably starting in the 19th century, mid-19th century, probably maybe even before, but got popular in the mid to late 19th century, 1800s. And then my first experience with this was Norman Vincent Peale, and I believe his book came out in 1955, The Power of Positive Thinking.
Yep.
So we're talking about making, think positive, and then, you'll be positive. And we've been doing this for the last, now 70 years. And our epidemic rate, our suicide rate for different demographics still is on the rise. Domestic violence is going up. So there's something, not that the mind-body connection is incorrect, because it is correct. This accountability looks at primary cause that's in the subconscious. It's another way to say this is shadow work. Yeah, shadow work. Looking at those things that may be present in me that I don't want to see, or maybe I have an inkling like I'm mean, but I don't want to admit it, because then I would be a bad person. So I work real hard at not being mean, which is dismissing myself, which creates more resentment, and the meanness just expresses through this repression. And one of the things you said, I'm a bad dad, that was a statement I made in the mid-90s, where I just owned that I was mean to my children. And before that moment, I thought I was a pretty good dad. I did well. I, disciplined my children, and I provided for them, and I made sure they had food, shelter, clothing, and the idea behind me, the hidden belief in me was, life is tough. I'm going to make these kids tough, doing them a favor so that when they get to life, they can be tough and handle it. Well, that was my belief that was carrying on the intergenerational dysfunction that I got from my parents, that my parents got from their parents. And so when I owned this dark truth, I want to say dark truth, I'm mean to my children. Same thing happened. There was something inside of me that just relieved. And then I was fortunate enough, it was before I put all this intentional living accountability tree stuff together, I heard myself say, it is my intent to be a loving, caring, nurturing father. And so in that moment of owning that shadow, or that thing I didn't want to admit to, the thing that hurt, it hurt, just say it. And then I felt that. I felt the pain of that, not only for me, but for my children. And then I heard myself say, it is my intent to be a loving, caring, nurturing father. I experienced loving, caring, nurturing father in that moment, because what a loving, caring, nurturing father does when he's wrong is admit he's wrong. That's a loving, caring, nurturing father. So I began to experience this newness, this relief from guilt, shame, beating myself up, self-deprecation, and all those things came out in my speech. And yet, if you ask me, no, I'm confident, no, I'm cool, no, I'm a good person, I'll give you the shirt off my back. But the subconscious self-criticism was constant. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. And it happened 10 years into this accountability work. And I've survived, and I'm cancer-free to this day. And I practice accountability. If I'd have never found this, never had been gifted with this idea to own my shadow, and then feel it, and then create an intent in that feeling energetic space, I believe I'd be dead now. I'd be gone. That chronic stress would have eaten me from the inside, which prostate cancer, colon cancer, and I wouldn't be here. So this person that the book you're reading, I forget her name, Joe something.
Joe Marchant.
Joe Marchant. The other gentleman, doctor that you referred to, with low back pain being rage, and he connected complicated post-traumatic stress with disease or manifesting in some ailment, chronic ailment. Gabor Mate, who says all disease, all dysfunction, whether it's mental, emotional, physical, is a result of holding this stress, complicated post-traumatic stress disorder. And in this process of going into the shadow, into that, it's counterintuitive, because people come to me wanting to feel better. And then the first thing I ask them, well, the first thing is, what do you want that you don't have? Now, a sense of inner peace. And then I tell them the obstacles are themselves, and I give them an example. Like, if I say 5 words, you tell me which ones resonate with you. Probably ones that repulse you. And I use arrogant, entitled, mean, controlling, needy. And they'll pick one of those and they'll own it. And you can see stuff sloughing off of them. And it is my intent to be kind, or is my intent to be gentle, or is my intent to be loving, or is my intent to forgive myself for all the pain I put myself through. And this work is demonstratable in real time. When I do groups, I ask in the check-in, what have you noticed is different? And me noticing something that's different gives me an idea of where that came from. So if I notice that I'm not as reactive in a certain situation, well, what's the cause of me not being reactive? Well, I own that I'm violent, or I own that I'm mean, or I own that I'm arrogant. And I got a demonstration that something shifted in me. Maybe I'm not talking better, good, and now I'm a good person. I'm an aware person. And I see, for me at first, when I got this information about how mean and violent I was inundated with the amount of violence I did. It was like everything I did, there was a violent thought first, and it was my default mode. When I recognized what happened to me as a child, the infantile incest, the humiliation, ridicule, the teasing to the point of torture, it made sense why I was mean and violent, because it kept people away from me. Now, knowing that I'm mean and violent, also I could recognize the pain. I could recognize that I'm separated from everybody. I could recognize that it's destructive. It is all those. It wasn't out of alignment with the needs of an infant, toddler, young child. To stay safe is keep people away. And then when I grew up into my 250-pound body, all I had to do was grunt and people would move away. And this was all subconscious with me. I had no idea. So owning that shadow of that thing we don't want to see about ourselves that is in alignment with the, I'm going to say, family of origin dysfunction, childhood trauma, and to the level of torment that some children go through, of being fractured and frozen, not knowing what to do, getting screamed at because you ran fast and broke something. And it's like, it's fracturing. And as a child, I learned to hold that in, keep it in, just stop. I use this example of like a 3-year-old holding back the tears, and it's like, it looks like, and that's actually sucking in the trauma. Instead of crying it out, it's a pulling in, and it's stuffed into my cellular body. And then I have, chronic issues, knee problems, cancer develops. So, I'm getting to the point where I'm getting tired of apologizing for how effective this is. It's like, I want to do this qualifier, and I'm going to do the qualifier, don't get me wrong, because some people can get this and they need medical attention. Fine, we need it. If you need medical attention, please go get it. And if you choose to look at this, let's gently move into it, because in my life it's effective, in your life it's effective, and hundreds, thousands of people that I've worked with in the last 25 years have shifted something in their lives, and they're able to participate in the struggle in a healthy way, and it's continuing to grow. the qualifier is fear of liability. You know, that's legitimate. I want to say that's legitimate. And if you need to see a doctor, continue with a doctor. But I would say let the doctor know, because if I was working with this person that was taking high blood pressure medication, well, I worked a couple of sessions with her, relieved some stress, and her blood pressure came down to normal, but she was still taking the high blood pressure. She her blood pressure went down too low. So along with this work, if most people have a doctor, a practitioner, a private doctor, let them know that you're working through this, or that you're using this method, and stay alert. So this mind, body, spirit connection is real. It's demonstratable. It's confusing. When you first hear this, it's like, what are you talking about? You want me to say I'm a bad person? No, I just want you to own arrogance. If there's arrogance in you and you own it, it doesn't have the need to express through you in spite of you. Your inner energy will express. If my inner energy was beat down, self-deprecating, it will express and project out onto. I heard this one time, if I don't heal my trauma, I transmit it. So it's the intergenerational handing down of this, what has been tagged genetic thing. So
I'd like to pick up on this point that is inferred in what you were just saying, and that's this, that the body, mind, spirit connection is not mechanical.
no.
And it's not linear. And I think that's oftentimes those of us that come from traumatic backgrounds and we have this need to control things,
Yeah.
will enter into this work looking for linear relationships. If I behave this way, I will get cancer. If I behave that way, I will heal cancer.
Right.
And that could be true.
Could be.
But my sense is that it's a trap to be looked out for, to become linear and mechanistic because it could just be another way that our complex PTSD mind takes something and puts it to work for itself,
right,
against us.
Yes.
So it's one of the things that we talk about in our meeting is that this is new enough that we're operating off intuition here, and we can I can see, for example, when I said I haven't experienced an outbreak of any inflammation from my Crohn's disease, and when I said I might not even have it anymore,
right,
who knows, I can't with scientific precision say it's because accountability, I did this accountability practice, therefore this is not a problem anymore.
mm-hmm.
I don't know that from
right.
A scientific microscopic research point of view. But I'm willing to be in the inquiry.
Yes.
And I'm willing to use the power of intention that I've learned in doing this work to go further.
Mm-hmm.
While at the same time, not making foolhardy decisions about abandoning medical care that I might be under, or it's not, I'm not ready for that.
Right.
I don't have the information that would give me the confidence to step off that cliff.
Correct.
Doesn't mean I can't, and
right.
It doesn't mean that information might not someday appear. It's just that at this point, it's like all evolution of consciousness. It's a potential, but it's not there yet.
Mm-hmm. For me, it's been incremental.
Yeah.
It's been steps at a time, and awarenesses, and then contemplating it, testing it. I am, here's my demonstration. I am compassionate, gentle, gracious, generous. And it's like everything I know that is true for me. When I started this in 1990, I was mean, caustic, sarcastic. Um, I used to say when I figured out what was happening that I spit poison on people. I was very destructive. And from my recovery, and a large part of that was learning this accountability process. This is my demonstration to me, my knowingness that I am compassionate, gentle, authentic. What was the other one? Gracious. I like gracious and generous. Um, and as well, I've been teaching it for 25 years and in recovery for 34. So, wow. Yeah.
So one of the other things that's come up as I've been doing this work and leading this meeting is again an intuitive hit showed up for me at the first or second meeting, and it was this: that there is a direct correspondence between healing and loving. And so I have set my intention so we end each meeting with an intention. And so my intention is I intend to experience the healing power of love.
Wow.
I intend to experience the healing power of love because I have love as I'm all alone.
Right.
And so my commitment to myself is to discover the actual opposite of that in my life experience.
Right.
And to set the intention to let that come into me, and through me, it's already in me, as well as wanting to come at me from you and everybody else in my life. So implied in this is some of my disease may be the result of self-hatred and other kinds of negative beliefs about love.
Yes.
And so it is my intention to experience the healing power of love.
Very good. Very good, Marty. The accountability tree, for those of you who have seen it, if you haven't, there's this accountability tree written. And then right under that is no blame, no judgment, and an arrow coming from accountability right to my truth. That no blame, no judgment is love. You're being heard. You're not being judged. You're not being blamed. You're not being chastised. You're not being ridiculed. When I first said I'm mean to my children, I was in a group of people who were compassionate people and had done this before and knew that if I got to what I was holding internally, that resentment that this meanness came from, if I owned the meanness without being judged or ridiculed, that this process would happen internally where it would come up out of the shadow, all that pain. And of course I was mean based on the pain I went through as a child. Now, I'm not blaming my parents. I'm not blaming their parents. I'm just saying my experience as a child is in alignment with me trying to keep people away from me, and meanness works really good. The other thing that works really good was alcohol. Alcohol would get me out, and we say it gets us, I'm uninhibited when I'm drinking. Well, no, I'm free of the guilt, the blame, the judgment, because whatever that connection to my self-criticism got disconnected for a while because of the alcoholic effect. And I was okay. I was happy. I could go out. I could talk to people. I could even be a funny guy. And it's like, and I wanted more of that, but the alcohol was only a temporary block to the self-criticism, to the self-deprecation, to the self-hate that was instigated in my childhood, because I could never, everything was, any expression of life, wanting something was a burden on somebody else. And I was told, be a good boy, shut up, don't bother me. So I did. And in that process, I created resentment, bitterness, and large amounts of contempt. and they will express through me. Whatever is in me will express through me. And that's where this accountability process, I discovered if I own the behavior, arrogant, entitled, mean, controlling, needy, it made a connection to that trauma, validated some weird counterintuitive way. And that's where the adrenaline, I didn't need to produce adrenaline to keep up the front. The adrenaline goes, oh, I'm glad you recognized me. It just settled down. I became lucid. It is my intent to be kind. That intent fused with the energy of the trauma, the frequency of the pain that was now relieved, went back down into my subconscious with a directive to seek and find kindness for me, just like it sought and found meanness for my survival. And I went from surviving to thriving, because this mechanism inside me that was traumatized and wants to protect me and put me in a hypersensitive mode where everything is an attack, which to that child, it was true, absolute truth. As an adult, it's not true. And yet my body's still responding as if it's an attack, creating adrenaline, cortisols, all the stressors. And any doctor will tell you that disease is caused from stress. And then they'll just give you a pill and tell you to like buck up and be better. It'll be okay. No, no. There's something in me. There's something in me that's motivating this adrenaline, cortisol, fight, flight, freeze, please experience. My body's being inundated with stressors. So.
You know, it's I find it interesting. You said, or I heard you say that this process is counterintuitive, and I think that's true for those of us coming to it relatively new at it. Yeah. But the more I've looked at this, the more it makes perfect sense in this sense that what I didn't get as a kid that led to my family of origin dysfunction, childhood trauma, as we call it. Yep. Was the consistent and persistent lack of acceptance of myself as I was.
Yes.
And the emotional violence that was done to tell me that I shouldn't feel the way I felt, to behave a way that I didn't feel capable of behaving, to pretend like my little brothers and sisters who died didn't die, to pretend that there was nothing wrong going on. That's that complex PTSD. It's the PTSD of 1,000 paper cuts.
Yeah.
Like accumulative. When we now as adults and we're doing this work and we own, I was mean to my children, or I like being in debt. We're actually giving ourselves that acceptance that we never got.
Right.
And I think that's why my body relaxed the first time, almost joyously, in telling a negative, judgmental, blaming truth, that if I'd said that to in my family of origin, I would have been knocked down and told, yes, of course you're screwed up.
Yep.
But to do it in that compassionate circle, or that circle of enlightened witnesses, as we call it, was the experience of acceptance, maybe for the first time in my life.
Yeah.
I remember, we've talked about this in the podcast before, I remember the time I came to observe you doing this work in the jail down at Rio Casumnas, here in Sacramento County. And I remember watching you tell these guys as they would come in, these prisoners, that you weren't there to judge them, you weren't there to get them to stop drinking, you weren't there to get them to stop using. And I would watch their faces as you said this to them, and it occurred to me, this may be the first time in their lives that they ever heard someone say, I support you making your own decisions. There's nothing wrong with you. You have every right to make your own decisions, AKA acceptance. And so for me, that is the that is tied to this physical stuff because, again, as we said earlier, giving myself acceptance, which is giving myself love, reduces the stress of the internal resistance in my body against telling the truth.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, as we've said, the more we do this work, the more it becomes second nature, because we are reprogramming our reticular activating system, that filter that allows information in or keeps information out.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more I reprogram my filter to let in thoughts and perceptions of peace, joy, freedom, community, which is my intention. I intend to create a world of joy, peace, freedom, and community. That's what I get more and more of. Well, those experiences, peace, joy, freedom, community, are anti-stressors.
Mm-hmm.
They're the pleasure centers being stimulated.
Yeah.
And without artificial means.
Correct.
Which is related to physical health and well-being.
Absolutely. Cannot not be.
Right.
Yeah. And you know, I'm still working in a treatment center, and I still tell them I'm not there to change them. I'm not there to judge them. I'm not there to say what would be right for them or better for them, because I don't know their choice. And what are you looking for that you don't have? Yeah, powerful stuff.
So I'm sitting here blowing my nose. It's allergy season. And I'm asking myself the question, how much of my allergies are because I believe it's allergy season? No, seriously.
I am. Yeah, no, yeah.
I mean, so habitually and chronically, since I moved to California, or since I moved to Sacramento in 1991, what did I hear when I came here? Oh, Sacramento's the allergy capital of California.
Right.
So right on time every year around this time, as the blossoms are just absolutely bursting open everywhere. So all these lovely pollens and whatever else is in the air. So I start sneezing and I assume I must have allergies. Well, what if that's not 100% true?
Correct.
What if it's not 100% chemical and mechanical? What if there's some thought in there? What if I said I intend to be allergy free?
There we go. Oh, I'm curious.
So that's another one of my intentions. I intend to be allergy free.
Absolutely. Okay.
And one of the things that we say, again, for the newcomer in this accountability practice is, when I say what I want and I create my intention, I do it without expectation of getting it.
Right.
So if I still sneeze and I'm taking my antihistamines or whatever, that doesn't mean this ain't working.
Right.
It just means I'm still doing the work.
Yes.
And I'm just open. I'm open to the possibility that my thoughts have contributed, maybe not to having the allergies themselves, but to the severity of them.
Yes. Wow.
So again, there are things that we can directly experiment on. So my allergies aren't life-threatening, and I don't have a doctor managing me on these occasions of spring and sometimes in the autumn. So it's not, I can experiment on this without necessarily endangering my physical health.
Correct.
So it's just kind of a neat opportunity to, again, inquire.
Mm-hmm. And then look for the demonstration.
Right. Exactly. There's a chapter in Joe Marchant's book that talks about experimentation that's been undertaken to look at the capacity of intentions, and I don't use that word, to enhance the efficacy of medicines. So there's a chapter, there's a section where this guy says, I always praise my medicines before I take them.
Hmm. Intention is a lot of like Native American culture, knowing what you want, intending. It's like we do sweats. I haven't done a sweat for a long time, but when we go into the sweat, you have an intention. You just don't go in there to see what happens. You go in there for a purpose. You intend something. In my groups, at first I ask them, what do you want that you don't have? And then every check-in, every day, every group is, today I intend to. What are you looking for today? What's your focus today? Because that focus creates a conscious command to the subconscious reticular activating system blinders to open up and check out something different and see what might be relevant to my intention, like learning something new today. It is my intent to be teachable. Well, that intent is a directive to this mechanism that's looking out for your welfare, because it says you deviate from this belief right here and you're going to die. And then boom, new information starts coming in. And then changes the outcome. The outcome automatically changes. The perception changes. The feeling at ease changes. So yes, it's demonstratable. There's a demonstration of this. And once a person gets that is different, wow, what did I do? I created an intent. I own the truth. I'm mean, created the intent to be kind, and I'm experiencing kindness emanating from me, which is like, how did I do that? Oh, I don't know. I created the intent. How did I become mean? I don't know. And I do know, family of origin trauma, it's in alignment with that. So working on the subconscious, working on the shadow. Yeah.
One of the things that we mentioned this last week, and I want to bring it up on a regular basis to the extent that I remember it, is that the mechanism that produced the thoughts of I'm a bad person,
Right.
I don't deserve to be loved, I'm unlovable. The very mechanism that produces that thought can produce the opposite thought. Right. I'm lovable, I'm beautiful. What did you say your 4 words? I'm a humble, what was gracious,
humble, gracious,
generous.
I forget the other one.
Yeah, so
gentle.
Right. So yeah. that shift occurs because you said it's going to occur.
Yes, I intended it. Yes.
Yes. And there is interactivity with the universe, source, spirit, the higher power, God, whatever word people are comfortable with, that we are utterly interconnected with, that is activated when we say that. And it won't be activated until we say it, because it's going to be activated by the unconscious I am. I'm unlovable. Okay, then the universe is going to show me unlovability 24/7.
For eternity.
Exactly. But the point I want to make, particularly to people who are new to this, is that the power that we have to create negativity in our lives is the exact same power we have to create positivity.
Right.
The power in our minds and hearts to say I'm unlovable is the same power that can say I'm lovable, I'm deserved, I'm generous, I'm gracious, etc. And the accountability tree, the accountability process, helps me learn how to do that, because the little traumatized kid inside of me does not want to change. He's found a formula that worked for him, and he doesn't want anything. He doesn't want change.
Right.
Even though he desperately wants to be loved.
Part of that affirmation thing that we've been doing for 100 years, Norman Vincent Peale, Power of Positive Thinking, that positive affirmation is putting a little thin layer of icing over this big cake of trauma. And when you when I access the trauma, oh, this is what I want to say, that the subconscious pool of information, traumatized child, the only way to change those markers or those frequencies or those indicators is to create an emotion equal to or greater than what's stored in there. And this process of truth, creates an emotion connection that is equal to or greater than what's in the traumatized part of ourselves. And then we intend from meanness to kindness. And it fuses with that, changes, reframes the subconscious motivational pattern, and it works just like it worked with the trauma to create meanness, alcoholism. It works to create gentleness and generosity and gratitude and
Exactly.
grace. Yes.
Exactly. So what do you want?
Exactly. What do you want that you don't have? What are you looking for?
Exactly.
And that question is as vital to me today, after 25 years of doing this and 34 years of recovery, as it was the first time I asked myself that, because I am here now and there's something I don't know, and I can identify something now at this level that I want, that I recognize I don't have. And that what this does is I'm going to continue to grow. So I continue to be open to what I want that I don't have.
Well, every day is new.
Every day is new.
And every day that I wake up, there's new information coming at me. There's new experience, there's new feeling, there's new sensation. And so I'm new every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so the opportunity to apply this process is available to me every day. It doesn't mean that it didn't work the day before, or I didn't do it good enough the day before. No, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with I'm an evolving being, and I get to learn about this new evolving being today because there's something new that I wasn't aware of yesterday.
I discovered recently, within the last 5 years, of the immense amounts of abuse I received as an infant in the form of incest. I wasn't ready for that 10 years. I wasn't able to, I didn't have the capacity to hold that and move through it with some kind of grace. That was devastating. When it came to me, I had built the capacity for that level of pain. And it is my intent to continue to build the capacity for whatever it is I need that's coming.
Yeah. One day at a time.
Yeah. Wow. Good stuff.
Good stuff. And our hour is about up.
Yeah.
So before we close out, I just want to let everybody know that if you'd like to experience this for yourselves, you can experience this process that we're talking about. We call it the accountability process, the ability to account for my thoughts, feelings, beliefs without blame or judgment. We have 5 meetings a week on Zoom that you are welcome to come in and check us out. There's a Monday evening meeting, there's a Tuesday afternoon, a Wednesday afternoon meeting, and Thursday evening and Saturday morning. Mm-hmm. And if you'll stay tuned to the end of the podcast, after John and I sign off, there'll be an ending card with our email addresses. And if you'd like to get specific information, or you'd like to get the Zoom address for these meetings, just send us a note and we'll be happy to send you an invitation.
Yeah. So
with that, as always, John, have the last word. Or words.
I'm glad we had another opportunity to say the same thing we've been saying in a different way, over and over and over. The pattern of dysfunction was repeated over and over and over for many years, either by my parents, and then when my parents stopped and I grew up, I took over where they left off times 10 and became my own critical parent. And so the repetition of this is, for me, was necessary. I needed to hear it over and over. I remember listening to one guy talk. I was early in my recovery, and I was about 5 years in, and he'd been at a lot of the meetings I was at for at least a year and a half, 2 years. And this guy would say the same thing over and over. Every time he opened his mouth, I'm going, oh no, here it comes. And then one day he was saying that, and a thought about my daughter came to me, and then he repeated it again. I can ask for help. And it's like, I can ask for it. It's like I put it together. It's like it made, and it took repetition and repetition, and me be willing to come back and listen and be noble and be tolerant. You know, this guy that keeps saying over and over and over without being able to hear the message. And then it, boom, oh my God, that was a major breakthrough for me. Anyway, thank you.
As we say in ACA meetings, keep coming back. It works.
Keep coming back. It works.
All right. Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
Talk to you next week.
You got it, Marty.
Thanks.